you.
Yes, but
About you, the team, the car, everything.
too many questions in the media about just the car. Like
No.
me and Oscar drove very, very well yesterday. I'm not saying others didn't, but others should not have been as far off as what they were. That was clear. But I think we do, by a little margin, have the best car. I'm not denying that. But not everything is about the car, and that's clear. But today was a deserved win, I think, because we made good decisions as a team. And in the past, like last year, we would have done the same race and we wouldn't have won the race because we were not the best at making those decisions. And today we were. So I give a lot of credit to the team because they worked hard over the winter to make sure they were ready for a day like today.
I think everyone who watches Formula One has this one very basic understanding. In order to win, you need to have a competitive car underneath you. Fast, reliable, good on its tyres, and a lot more. If anyone thinks for a second that Max Verstappen could win in this year's Haas, you're either rage baiting or severely deluded and need to seek therapy. Just like me after watching Ferrari's performance in Australia. But anyway, Lando's comments to me didn't seem like they stemmed from nowhere. Something sparked that response, and as a driver who is normally very tapped into social media, the light bulb immediately switched in my head. So I decided to go down the rabbit hole for myself to find some people's takes on his race performance and those comments in general. Yeah, it's fair to say he's been getting cooked. Now you might be wondering, who cares, right? Just some opinions on social media. And I agree with you. People are entitled to say whatever they want to say, think however they want to think. But I just find the irony of this Lando best car, Max best driver narrative a bit reductive. To me, I think the problem is that fans, or even people nowadays in general, think of everything in black and white. If it ain't this, it's that, and nothing in between. When almost always, there's a lot more nuance to these situations. I mean, to be fair, you're probably not going to find much nuance in a tweet with limited characters or an Instagram comment, but the point is, nuance and context is important. 2024 was a showcase of Verstappen's brilliance, and by no means would I ever try to downplay it. And on the balance of the season, they were on average second fastest. But then I start seeing takes like, Red Bull was the fourth or even fifth fastest car, and Max is this untouchable driver that can never be beaten. Now maybe it's a joke that just went over my head, but the number of times I've seen this take, I genuinely can't tell if you lot are being dead ass. Even now, I'm seeing people talk about Max dragging a tractor to second, putting the car in places it shouldn't be. The Red Bull second seat has really done immaculate work for Verstappen's PR. People really look at the results of Perez and now Lawson and think that's the true performance of the car, when it's pretty well known that Red Bull is a team built around Verstappen. Everything they do is to provide a car that he feels comfortable in and can extract the most out of. The second driver is expected to perform, but many have struggled to deal with the extreme levels of sensitivity that Max likes to have in a car. Albon explained it best on the High Performance podcast, using the analogy of a video game and having the mouse sensitivity turned up all the way to the maximum. For Verstappen, the more you increase that sensitivity, the quicker he gets, obviously up to a certain point. But for most of the second drivers, as the sensitivity increases, the more they struggle with handling and thus can't extract the full potential of the car, because they don't have the level of innate feel that Max has. It's difficult to explain because how do you measure something that's just considered natural? Which is why Verstappen's teammates have all fallen by the wayside and why the Dutchman is considered one of the best drivers the sport has ever seen. But to be clear, that doesn't mean he's out driving the Red Bull. That's physically impossible. The car has speed limitations, handling limitations, tyre limitations, and a lot more. What Max is incredible at though is getting as close to those limitations as possible. And the most impressive thing in my opinion is the consistency with which he and the team perform at a high level. Because at the end of the day, Max isn't a one-man band. He still relies on the mechanics to provide 2-second pit stops, the strategy team to make the best decisions possible, the engineers to design a competitive car that is capable of winning. And it's no different for any other driver. Now would he be able to do that in another team or another car, like the McLaren? Maybe, maybe not. Some might argue that in a team that's not entirely centered around him, that he wouldn't have such a big advantage over his teammate. Or in a car that requires a different way of driving, that doesn't play to his strengths, he'd struggle a bit more. But the flip side to that is since he's such a phenomenal talent, he'd find a way to overcome it regardless. Point is, we don't know, and probably will never know, because why would Max leave an environment where he's already comfortable and has the opportunity to win more championships? When he was dominating back in 2023, the narrative, for the most part, was the acknowledgement that he is by far the best in the world. Most people attributed the reason for the success down to the driver and not his machinery. Now though, in 2025, Lando strings together a brilliant weekend, taking pole, setting the fastest lap, and winning in extremely difficult conditions, albeit in a car that is currently a class above the rest. But all I keep seeing is those same people who credited Verstappen for his great drives, trying to discredit Norris's talent and how he's, quote, nothing without a rocket ship. Now, to be fair, Norris himself has said things in the past that have come back to bite him. Specifically, one interview he did back in 2020 where he was asked about Lewis breaking the all-time win record, to which he said he should be winning all the races, he only has to beat 1 or 2 guys. Then 2024 comes and he realizes it's not so easy. Fair enough, at the time, the irony of it all was pretty funny. Loads of people clowned him for it, heck, even I grilled him a bunch of times. But some people are still holding that grudge against him even to this day. Mind you, he said this in his 2nd season. I mean, aren't we all guilty of saying stupid stuff? Or stuff that we don't mean for that matter? Because from what I've seen, Lando has grown a lot since then. And I'm not even a fan of his, since I know there's going to be a few British bias merchants waiting to crash out. Believe it or not everybody ties their support down to nationality. I've supported Lewis since I started watching the sport back in 2009/2010, because of his amazing backstory and rise to F1. I'm also a fan of Charles for the same reason. But being a fan of someone shouldn't blind your judgment. I mean, for some people it does, but you can still recognize and appreciate when someone does a great job. I don't know, maybe I'll get cooked, but I feel like a lot of the criticism Lando gets is just a bit forced. Half the time I don't even know what people are getting mad about. What made Lando's win great wasn't just all down to car performance. The growth both he and the team displayed in such tricky conditions, in my view, was far more impressive than anything else. In previous seasons, we saw how frequently they used to make mistakes under pressure, particularly in unpredictable weather. Russia 2021 is the most obvious example, and more recently, Canada, Silverstone and Brazil 2024. But even though it was just one race, something about that drive from this guy indicated personal development. He's no longer the little Lando who seemed harmless and a bit of a pushover. Well, at least on the basis of the season opener, that no longer seems to be the case. His demeanor is different, a lot more clinical and focused on getting the most out of the race weekend. Verstappen-esque if you like. And same with Oscar as well. Both drivers are operating at an extremely high level currently. Only thing that went wrong for Piastri is his mistake. And I guess that part of the race where McLaren told him to hold position. Initially, I was going to shame them for introducing team orders in race 1. But with context and hindsight, it actually made sense why they told him to hold station. Around lap 29, they were coming to lap Ocon and Behrman. So the reasoning behind the team order from going for too much risk trying to pass a back marker. Because in the past, McLaren have paid the price for that, e.g. Brazil 2012 with Hamilton. Now, did it ruin Piastri's rhythm? Probably did. I mean, he was closing in at a rate of knots and got very, very close. That's not something you're trying to hear as a driver, especially when you're trying to win your home race. But then, at the same time, how much Lando was managing the gap could have played a factor in how close Oscar got to his gearbox. Either way, Piastri ran wide and dropped well out of DRS. After that, it made things less stressful for the team, but I think we'll definitely come back to this intra-team rivalry in a future video, because I'm convinced this isn't the last of it. But that moment after the safety car restart where they went off the track, I thought it was all over for both of them. Having said that though, it was easy to misjudge, especially when they were pushing so hard and were the first ones to reach that part of the track where it was raining quite hard. I was heartbroken for Oscar because he was doing such a great job, but I also have to commend Lando for his brilliant car control, rejoining the circuit without losing too much time. He did sustain floor damage from that off though, which is why those final few laps was so intense. The car advantage McLaren had was obvious earlier in the race, when the stint lengths were much longer and their superior tyre management shone through. But during those final few laps, degradation didn't matter, and Max could push as hard as he pleased without having to worry about deg. I mean, you can literally pinpoint the moment where he could smell blood in the water and then wasted no time applying the pressure. But Norris kept his cool and didn't get flustered whatsoever. A previous version of him might have gotten rattled and allowed Max to get the better of him. This time around, he didn't crack under pressure. Maintaining this across 24 races though is the hard part. But so far, it seems like he's worked on himself a lot over the winter break, which is great to see. Now, one last thing I wanted to address in this video is the potential McLaren dominance. To me, I think it's nonsensical to base this off of one outlier race. To start with, Australia is not one of those traditional type of circuits. On top of that, the weather was all over the place, so it's very difficult to get a good read on race pace when things are constantly changing. This weekend in China, the forecast is set to be dry on all 3 days, which should give us a bit more insight into just how good the McLaren is compared to the competition. But for now, all we know is that the car is great in intermediate conditions. But we already knew that from last year in races like Canada and Silverstone. That period of the race where Verstappen's tyres fell off and the McLarens were putting like a second a lap on him was simply due to them having better deg. Again, not really new information since their car last year was also very kind on its tyres. Even then, I still expect there to be a good fight this year between all of the top 4 teams since they all have their own set of inherent strengths and weaknesses. Plus, there's still a bunch of development and upgrades to come. Believe it or not, there will be weekends where McLaren won't have such a significant advantage. At least I hope so anyway. Who knows, they might even be slower than others at some stage, since things can change very quickly. How a team optimizes their setup over a weekend matters a lot, even more so if it's a sprint weekend. A prime example is Ferrari making their setup worse between Friday and Saturday in Melbourne and ending up 7/10 off pole. Now, does that mean that's the gap in reality? No. The car definitely has a lot more potential than what they showed in that qualifying session. They just need to do a better job at unlocking that pace to see their true form. But wait, what am I talking about? China is the first race of the season, guys. I can't wait to see Ferrari begin their title campaign. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed. Let me know what you think about this whole fastest car narrative and Lando's comments in that interview down in the comment section below. Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel if you're new to get my latest videos in the future. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.